Welcome to Inbox Roundup number 9. I'm going to have to start taking my shoes off to count soon. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about Patrick on the state of Canada's military. Rob and Larry asked me two similar questions about Russia's Victory Day parade. Steve asked me about Ukrainian IEDs in Bakhmut. Steven asked me about using National Guard as police in Wisconsin. Benny asked me why the U.S. is keeping tanks outside. Bernar asked me about Russian troops that were exposed to anthrax from digging trenches. And Andrew has a question about NATO fighting without tech. A couple of things before I get started. I'm going to go to Dallas, Texas on May 20th for a fundraiser with Ultra. It's essentially a cocktail party, and you can meet me there. The Eventbrite link is linked in the pinned comments below. Every dollar goes to getting Americans who volunteer for serving in Ukraine first aid kits and body armor, as well as the logistics for getting their bodies home if they fall in battle. It's a good cause. You get to meet me, have a couple of drinks. And by the way, some people have also asked, why would you tell Russia, China, or Iran where you're going to be? And to that I say, you must not know Texas very well. Now, let's start with Patrick from Canada. I am wondering if the Canadian military is adequate for future conflicts. NATO recently gotten mad at Canada for a military spending budget. Do you think that the Canadian military in its current state would be a good ally fighting and logistics-wise in a future war against modern U.S. NATO enemies? If not, which way could we improve our military? So if you notice, this is the first question. I'm wearing my RCMP shirt right here. Thank you for that, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I do love this shirt. I wear it all the time. Would Canada be a good partner? Absolutely. Absolutely. I serve with Canadian soldiers. I work with Canadian soldiers. Canadians are some highly motivated professional soldiers for reasons that I'm going to get into in a second. Canada punches way above its weight. I think it's mainly because Canada supplies like 10% of all of the UN's peacekeeping troops. Like when there's a mission, Canada's like, we'll take it. In Afghanistan, Canada was like, oh, you betcha, I'll go get the Leopards. They brought Leopard tanks to Ukraine, or not to Ukraine, to Afghanistan. For a while, Canada was holding Afghanistan down. When there was a mission, Canada was like, yeah, we'll go. I think they sent over 40,000 troops through Afghanistan. Yeah, Canada was stepping up, man. RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they're in the Congo, they're in Haiti, they're in the West Bank, I believe. So when Canada needs to train, other militaries or other police agencies, they're there. They're there. There is nothing wrong with the motivation of Canadian forces. They're spot on. They're very good. Their Air Force is good as well. They're upgrading to the F-35. They're spending a lot of money on the F-35, but it kind of makes sense because there's constantly violations of Canada's airspace from Russian bombers, or at least there is the specter of violations of that airspace. So it makes sense that Canada spends a lot of money on their Air Force. I don't really know much about Canada's Navy. I know there was a scandal a couple of years ago where they replaced all of their rank insignia and it cost like millions of dollars. It did nothing. And I think there was a boat or a ship that had to go out and like half its crew, they needed to get crew from 2 ships just to make the mission. But I don't know enough about Canada's Navy. I don't know enough about any Navy to really speak on that. I can tell you that from what I understand, Canada has some older kit, even things like rucksacks. The rifle, I think the C7A2 is a good rifle. Back in the 90s when we would fight against Canada doing exercises, what was that optic called? The C79. See the C79 optic that they put on their C7s. They're picking people off at like 300 meters. They're just banging dudes at 300 meters. Meanwhile, U.S. Army at 300 meters, we're still we're engaging with our heavy weapons, but we're not hitting anybody out at 300 meters. But the Canadians with that sight was a force multiplier. And Canada had that in the 90s. But the weapons are showing its age. I think that I think that the military of Canada, or at least the Canadian Army, it's like 44,000 people, and I think there's another like 16, 17,000 in the reserves. To put that into perspective, the New York City Police Department has like about 33,000 officers. So the New York City Police Department is 1/3 the size of the Canadian Army without its reserves. And, I think the reason why Canada punches above its weight is that they have a lot of experience in getting deployed and in dealing with peacekeeping missions where they're using their skills every day. People call America the world's policeman. Canada is the world's policeman. Because whenever there's a UN mission, they're like, hey, we got it. So, but I think they need help. I think they need more people. They probably need to get their army up to about 100,000. That being said, when it comes to the quality of the average Canadian soldier, I've got nothing but good things to say about them. Okay, Rob and Larry had two similar questions. They asked, the fact that the May 9th parade in Moscow only featured one T-34 tank when just a few years ago the parade showed off T-72s, T-80s, T-90s, and T-14s. Seems like all the working tanks are committed to the battle or destroyed. In light of these developments, do you think that Russia is ready to go home? What do you think? What are your thoughts on how morale plays into the fighting effectiveness of soldiers? All right, so my first statement is if you're not watching Covert Cabal, you need to watch Covert Cabal. If you like my stuff, watch Covert Cabal. Essentially, these dudes, one of the things that they're very good with intelligence, and they have the patience to just sit there and count tanks. So they went and bought satellite footage and counted Russian tanks, and the link for that video will actually be in the description below if you want to watch it. So my thoughts about the parade, the May Day parade. For those of you who don't know, every year around this time, Russia has a parade celebrating its victory. It's usually a big showcase of all their military equipment, all their hardware. Sometimes they introduce new hardware there, and it's almost like a little mini arms expo. But this year it wasn't so big. And some people were saying like, oh, it's because all of Russia's tanks are at the front. Russia's pretty big. They can probably scrape up enough tanks and drivers to do a parade, and they almost certainly have. All they need is they need the tank to run. They don't need it to shoot. They don't need its systems, its NBC system to be effective. They just need it to drive and not fall apart right during the parade route. So they can probably find enough tanks to do that. I think that the reason there weren't more vehicles there has nothing to do with troops or tanks. I think it may more likely be operational planning. Last year's parade was probably planned a year before. So even before the invasion, they're planning, all right, we're going to get these units from here, we're going to do this. I'm sure these events take a while to plan. And as soon as the event's over, you're planning the next one. It's a big event. And you have to house all these soldiers and feed them. Provide sanitation. It's a big thing. I think it's possible that this particular event was more low-key because they just didn't have the command to plan this whole thing, and because a lot of the planning cells are now worrying about Ukraine. I think it's more of a planning thing than a troop thing. The other option is that I don't know if the president of Russia wants the Russian army so close to Moscow. So that could be a thing. Now, granted, none of these tanks, none of these troops have live ammunition, but maybe when you're running a war that may or may not be unpopular, because God knows how true the polling is in Russia, maybe you don't want a couple divisions of troops inside your capital where you are, right? That's how coups happen. So the second question was, in light of these developments, do you think Russia's ready to go home? What are your thoughts on how morale plays into fighting effectiveness of soldiers? I don't think Russia is ready to go home. And more importantly, I don't think the senior officers are ready to go home, because this is where careers are made. Like, if any Russian officer wants a career post-war, they better have some good accomplishments under their belt in the current war. And I would not be surprised if there's Russian officers, majors, colonels, generals who are going, man, we need a win. I need to get something on my OER, my evaluation report for the year. I need a win. I'm going to keep throwing bodies at this thing till I get a win. I think the troops might be ready to go, especially conscripts or people who volunteered for the money. They might be ready to go. Morale, how does morale affect things? Morale normally affects discipline. And it's morale is this insidious, it's like a pothole. You know, a little bit of water seeps into a crack, and then the water freezes, and the pothole crumbles. It gets bigger, and then it gets bigger. So, like, the first thing to go is discipline. Where you're like, man, I don't feel like getting up in the cold. I'm not going out on watch. You just say I went out on watch. So discipline goes first. And then readiness goes. Because then you start going, man, I'm not maintaining this piece of equipment. I'm never going to use this thing anyway. And then that falls back to the conditions of your vehicles and your equipment. And then you start getting drugs and alcohol into the system where, like, people are like, you know what, I'm just going to get high. I'm just going to get drunk. Screw this place. I don't want to be here. You know, if I get high or drunk, it's not going to change the outcome of the war, but at least I'll be high or drunk, right? And then out of the alcohol comes looting. And then after looting comes disregard for the civilian population in ways that I can't talk about on YouTube or I'll get demonetized. So that's kind of how morale goes down: discipline, readiness, condition of vehicles, alcohol, looting, and then disregard for the civilian population. I would also say disregard for subordinates. If you have an officer who has low morale and he doesn't think he's going to get that promotion because his unit as a whole hasn't been performing well, he might not treat his subordinates all that well, or he may risk their lives. And the soldiers can see through that. They know when they're being used as a tool, right? Okay, so Steve asks, will Ukrainian Bakhmut defenders leave behind IEDs, or is the ordnance more useful in other ways? So an IED is a lot of effort for a maybe. I have a little bit of demolitions training from BNOC, which I think is called ALC now, which is basically the school you go to become a staff sergeant. From the little I learned at BNOC, I wouldn't want to touch an IED. I wouldn't want to build one, because there's no such thing as a bomb maker that got a B. You know, you're graded pass fail. So I want nothing to do with whatever trigger mechanism is hooked up to this bomb that I'm gonna have to place. And plus, when you're leaving an area, that's like the last thing you're thinking of is, oh, hold on, let me leave a trap. Like, no, you want to get documents burned, or you want to destroy caches of ammunition, and then you want to get the heck out of there. You're not going, oh, hold on, let me leave this little thing. Like, dude, I'm getting on that truck. I guarantee you that. I'm getting on that truck. So I'm not gonna build an IED in the hopes that maybe some Russian soldier will trip upon it and you're never even gonna know whether you did anything. So it's too. I think probably no. It's just too dangerous to do, and there's just not enough reward for doing it. And the only reason you see insurgency forces use things like IEDs is that they have the time to create these things, and it's one of their few weapons they have at their disposal. So Stephen asks, I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We have a criminal rate that is higher than state average. What you do here is a suggestion of using the Wisconsin National Guard to enforce the law in Milwaukee. Would love to hear your opinion on such a proposal. All right, so for those of you who don't know, the American National Guard is a state-oriented part-time reserve force that's under control of each state governor. It's almost literally like an army of Wisconsin. But this reserve force can be federalized by the president and sent off to war in other places. And the Army National Guard is not restricted under the Posse Comitatus Act, so the National Guard can carry weapons in support of law enforcement in America. Typically, the National Guard does fires and floods. If there's a hurricane, they'll call the National Guard to evacuate people. I can tell you this, if you activated the National Guard, the crime rate would essentially go to zero wherever they were at that moment, because nobody wants to tangle with a soldier with an M4 rifle. Nobody. I think the problem with activating the National Guard for using them as law enforcement in the city of Milwaukee is that there's a lot of cops and state employees who are in the National Guard. I'd probably say probably 25% of the National Guard is probably cops, and then 50% college students, and then 25% like everybody else. If you're trying to clean up Milwaukee and you activate the National Guard, then essentially 25% of the police force around your state is going to be on that mission, right? And so you're removing police from other places to deal with the problem in Milwaukee, and that probably won't make your constituents happy in the towns where you took police from. The other thing is optics. There's no song by NWA called F the National Guard. You know, usually when the National Guard shows up, they have a truck and they're getting you away from a fire. So once the National Guard start carrying rifles and pulling triggers, then the opinion toward the National Guard is gonna drop like a rock. Any money used for the National Guard should probably put more into policing. It's fine that the National Guard might carry weapons after a hurricane or after a flood to prevent looting. That's cool, I get it. But using them as an active police force, it would probably turn the opinion of the entire country against them. Benny asks, I don't know if you saw the recent video of Covert Cabal. Of course I did. I love Covert Cabal. But they counted U.S. tanks in a similar way to previous videos in which they counted Russian tanks. After so many people making fun of the Russians, keeping their tanks out in the open exposed to the elements and unmaintained, it looks like U.S. tanks are also kept outside exposed to the elements. Yes, the difference is that it's drier. You don't get a lot of snow at Sierra Army Depot. We're also moving them a lot. The other difference is that I believe the electronics are all removed from the tanks, at least a sense of electronics. And American tanks are also painted with CARC paint, which stands for, chemical agent resistant coating. Chemical agent resistant coating, CARC paint. Don't breathe it in. Don't breathe that stuff in, because the VA will be more than happy to say not service connected. So the CARC paint is this special chemical warfare paint that allows you to decontaminate a vehicle a lot easier than if it wasn't painted with CARC paint. It also helps prevent rust. So I don't know if Russia has an equivalent of CARC paint, but the U.S. has CARC paint, so we're not too concerned about leaving our vehicles out in the elements. Bernar asks, I've been hearing reports of Russian troops while digging trenches have dug into a graveyard where animals that had anthrax were buried. It is easy to laugh at what seems like Russian stupidity, but I got thinking, if the Russians weren't putting trenches there, how much of a weakness would it really be? Could the Russians just put more mines there or keep more artillery on call to cover that gap? All right, so I actually read the article that was associated with this, and it smells funny. And if you've noticed, I don't make fun of Russians. I never go, oh, they're so stupid, ha ha ha. Oh, you pick up burned body parts the size of chicken McNuggets, and then you try to go laugh at people who are getting killed. I've done that. So I don't laugh at people getting killed or being stupid. So this particular story, it smelled funny to me. Supposedly it happened in Melitopol, which is behind enemy lines, and this guy named Ivan Fedorov, who was this exiled Ukrainian mayor, reported on the story. I mean, I don't know how good of contacts this mayor has back in his old city, but this city has been in occupied territory for almost over a year now. So I don't know how much interaction he has with people. So basically the story says that 2 soldiers were infected with anthrax while digging trenches. Anthrax is something we know how to deal with. We've known how to deal with anthrax for years. We've had an anthrax vaccine. Back before current vaccine controversy, I was in the military when the anthrax vaccine was given to all soldiers, and soldiers were complaining that, well, we don't know what's in this anthrax vaccine. Like, farmers have taken this since, for plenty of years. Farmers take the anthrax vaccine. We're good, right? And if you do get anthrax, then you get intravenous antibiotics, and you have like a 55% chance of living. So, normally when a soldier joins and then before a soldier deploys, they get vaccines. They get vaccinated for like everything. I don't know if Russia does that. I assume they almost certainly vaccinate people when they go to basic training, because it's a public health thing if you have unvaccinated people in your military. So I don't know whether soldiers got the anthrax vaccine. Maybe not. But getting vaccines before you deploy is just a normal course of deployment. So all that being said, this story kind of smells funny. I don't know if this story is true. I don't think this story is true. It's certainly possible that maybe some soldier had signs of anthrax and they were brought to the hospital. We really don't know. Now, the second question is, could Russians just put more mines by their trenches or keep more artillery on call to cover that gap? A trench without infantry defending it is soon going to be an enemy trench. So essentially, no. It's easy to say, oh, just put more artillery there. Well, now you got to coordinate for that artillery. Who's going to spot the artillery? You know, you need infantry there to warn rear line units that the enemy is. Okay, finally, Andrew asks, U.S. infantry, once coming into enemy contact, is to return fire against fire superiority and call for artillery air support, then maneuver to eliminate the threat. How would U.S. Army infantry soldiers compare to other NATO infantry soldiers, such as British or German, if they fought fairly, aka take away their air support and artillery support? Is the average U.S. infantry man grunt inferior to NATO, British, French, German infantry in terms of training capability when you take away the technology advantage? So we actually don't have a technology advantage in the sense of air support. It's not like if you get 5 headshots, you get an artillery strike. Doesn't work like that. Things like artillery is kept by the battalion commander or brigade commander and divvied out as needed. You might get mortar support from the battalion commander, and at least in the American Army, we have mortars down at the company level, so you get a little bit of punch, with 60 millimeter mortars at the company level. But it's not like we run into trouble, we call for artillery and we get it. That artillery has already been planned and tasked out, and if it's not in your actual operational plan, you're not getting that artillery. Now, airstrikes are, I don't even know where those are planned. Those are probably held at the brigade or division level or higher. I know that in Afghanistan, there were aircraft that would do circles over Afghanistan in case any unit got in trouble. They can be vectored toward that unit and drop a JDAM and take care of business that way. But all that stuff is in your brigade commander's operational plan for whatever mission you're doing there. And you might get briefed like, hey, if we do run into trouble, part of, support in your 5-paragraph op order is like, hey, we have a B1 on call to drop a JDAM if we run into trouble. But that doesn't mean you're going to get it. So there's really no technological advantage, because just because we have these assets doesn't mean they're actually going to be issued out if you get into a tick, troops in contact. And I would actually say, the British, French, the Germans, and the U.S., they're pretty much all at parity down at the squad and platoon level when it comes to infantry abilities. There's really no genuine advantage in any of those countries. They all have some pretty darn motivated soldiers, British, Germans, and the French. Now, above, at higher echelon units, different, Germany has a big problem right now with their military, but at the individual soldier level, at the platoon level, at the company level, yeah, they know how to fight, and they want to be there. I don't think that any NATO unit really has an advantage over any other, because for the most part, at least the British, the French, I'm really trying to think of any NATO unit I ever met that wasn't good. And they were all good. Spanish were good. The Italians are good. For the most part, if you're in a NATO infantry unit, you're pretty much at parity with every other NATO infantry unit. I'm really trying to think of an example where it wasn't, and I can't. So that probably says something about the quality of a lot of European troops, at least down at the platoon company level. And that's all I got for today. Hey, remember, come meet me in Dallas, Texas, on May 20th. The link will be in the description below. If you want to support the channel, buy a t-shirt from Bunker Branding. Don't wear t-shirts, throw me $5 on my Substack. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Hey everyone! New Ryan McBeth t-shirts and hoodies from Bunker Branding are available. I'm gonna get the HIMARS shirt. What are you gonna get, Donald? The Patriot shirt, because I'm a patriot. It's the best shirt, the biggest shirt. Make 14 tangos great again. What are you gonna get, Barack? Let me be clear. I'm going to get a Drone Sweet Drone shirt. What about you, George?
I'm going to get a Knife Hand shirt because they're weapons of mass destruction. What about you, Billy?
Oh, I'm going to get a Landmine Marker shirt because my presidency always blew up in my face.
I'll tell you what I'm going to get. Ronald Reagan, but you're dead.
I came back to tell you that no matter our politics, we're all Americans. And we should buy Ryan's hoodies and t-shirts because they pay for the stock footage and licenses that allow him to make awesome content. So come on down to Bunker Branding and buy a Ryan McBeth t-shirt or I'll start the bombing in 5 minutes.